everyone, welcome to the community classroom. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator. We're going to have a quick discussion, but a very important discussion. As a matter of fact, this is the most important discussion that we have had in the community classroom over this past year. So we're going to be discussing the idea of a school for boys. Now, a number of individuals are already waiting for a school for boys that has been planned for quite a while, and people are waiting, and many people are unsure if this school is actually going to materialize. What I want to offer to you is a thought about another option in terms of a school for boys or an educational process for boys who are really in need of a particular program that's geared towards boys. One of the things that often happens in communities and with respect to raising children even, is that individuals often plant orange seeds, but they expect an apple crop. And so in that way, they will put certain things into or plant certain things into a particular socio-cultural group of children, boys in this situation, but expect the outcomes of another socio-cultural group. And so, again, planting orange seeds, but expecting an apple crop. And this happens with little boys identified as African American little boys. There's an expectation that you can just plant anything into them, but they are supposed to mysteriously manifest the outcomes of children who would be considered European American descendant. And so I'm going to share with you some thoughts about a school for boys or an educational process perhaps for boys that you might want to think about. Now, of course, this is going to automatically appeal to women who are struggling to raise and educate little boys alone, but this is something that men also should be thinking about in terms of a communal dynamic. One of the things that takes place with little boys is that sometimes little boys have special needs in terms of socialization, and so they have inadequate socialization in regular school programs. And when that happens, it means that the academic process suffers. And this happens most frequently with little boys who have fathers that are absent. So I'm going to share an idea with you related to an alternative that many people may have not thought about. However, some people actually may have thought about it, but perhaps they have not thought about putting it forward. And so I'm going to put it forward as we are wrapping up the community classroom. Now, there are many people who might put forth the idea of a school for boys, for African American boys, or for any boys for that matter. But one of the things that you need to think about in terms of creating something that is separate from the regular public school system is, if you're going to go above and beyond, you should go above and beyond. And what you want to think about in terms of selecting a program for little boys, adolescent boys, is a program that's going to bring out of them what you want to have brought out. And so one of the things you have to think about when you are planning for this type of process is, what is it that you are seeking to cultivate? What do you want to see in terms of that crop that you're creating? You're going to plant something, you're expecting fruit. What type of fruit are you expecting? And so one of the things you have to think about in terms of who would be running a program or facilitating a program or educating children in the program, you have to think about who they are and what they are bringing to the table. You know, what is the character of the individual? What is the mindset of the person who would be creating this educational process? You know, what's the emotional state of that person? What's their social disposition? You know, is the person actually capable of teaching? Can the person educate? And teaching is about imparting. But educating is about the gift to bring out of individuals that which is latent. And so it's a two-pronged process, the teaching and the educating. And then the other part is who is actually capable of creating curriculum. And so who knows how to put those things together, figure out what is needed, put it together, and then figure out the delivery method. And above all, when you're talking about creating a new program, particularly for vulnerable children, little boys, adolescent boys, you need to first look for an individual to create this program, whatever it looks like. The person needs to genuinely care about people in general. It's not enough to be on YouTube talking about creating a new school. A person has to actually have a genuine concern for people outside of YouTube. And in terms of education, one of the things missing in education is that little boys often do not get to see themselves reflected in the model known as the teacher, the educator. So they often see female educators, and this is definitely the case when you're talking about elementary school, and then also the case in high school. And so one of the things missing is that model. So little girls always get that model. They get to see themselves reflected back in the teacher. So there's a form of empathy there. So there's an empathic dynamic going on. Generally speaking, this isn't for all teachers or all educators, but for the most part, little girls get to see themselves reflected back. They get to see a great deal of their style in terms of operating in the world. They get to see that in the classroom. Little boys don't get to see that really in the classroom very often. And males and females biologically are different, and socially, they're socialized different in different ways. And so one of the things that is missing again for little boys is that father figure in the classroom or in the teaching space, in the educational space. That is often missing. And so if people are thinking about creating an alternative educational process for a specific group of boys, one of the things that people might want to think about is an individual or group of individuals who provide a positive father figure archetype. This is important because this is what is missing for a number of little boys, and for women who are seeking these alternative educational processes because there is an absent father or an under-involved father. It is very important that the individual sought or the individuals sought fit this mold. You can see that they are a positive father figure archetype for the little boy or the teen boy. And a positive father figure archetype, and this is different from the positive mother figure archetype. There's a focus on protection, wisdom, guidance, discipline, values, and pro-social behavior. Another thing that you want to see in an individual who's going to be an educator for little boys, and if you're talking about African American little boys or Black American little boys, you want an individual who's overseeing this or cultivating this process. You want that individual to have a holistic vantage point. You don't want someone who only sees the educational process as about imparting reading, writing, and arithmetic. You need someone who understands that the child, the teen boy, is a whole person, and that educating the whole person means educating the whole child. And so you can't just focus on the academics. You need to also focus on the social and emotional development of the young person. And so you need individuals, or an individual overseeing this process or consulting on this process. You need an individual who understands this and is able to create processes to facilitate that holistic development. One of the things that people may not be aware of is that in terms of IQ, different children score in different ways. They perform in different ways on standardized IQ assessments. And one thing that has been noted is that individuals who are identified as African American male children, they may not perform high in terms of the standard testing process. However, as a collective, they score high, relatively high, in an area that is related to visual perceptual skills, visual motor skills. They tend to be gifted in terms of creativity and making things and building things. Their hand-eye coordination tends to be extraordinary. So there's a mathematic ability that goes on in the heads of quote unquote African American male children that is not tapped into necessarily in the classroom or on many of these standardized tests, but it's one of the reasons why black male children or brown male children are so gifted in things like basketball. They can actually mathematically calculate in their heads, how the ball is moving and what it takes to get the ball from point A to point B. They are also gifted in creating things, putting things together, puzzles, blocks, building things. And so a lot of the creative technical stuff, they tend to be very gifted in this. However, schools don't necessarily facilitate processes where they will be able to manifest these gifts. And so many of them get bored and may misbehave because they are gifted but bored, and there's no space for them to cultivate those gifts. And so another thing that you need in terms of someone who is going to facilitate an educational process for such young children and teen boys is an educator or a facilitator of this type of process, this sort of school for boys. You need someone who is gifted and creative themselves. They need to be gifted and creative. And they also need to be a gifted and creative thinker and teacher. So they need to be gifted and creative in terms of their cognitive processing. And they also need to be gifted and creative in terms of their teaching methodology or their understandings of how teaching and education needs to take place. So in other words, you need someone who is creative enough to be able to teach both Riley and Huey. And this leads to the issue of teaching and educating track record. Children don't care about credentials. What children care about are things like how much you care. So they care about how much an educator cares about them. You've probably seen children who will refuse to perform in school if they believe that the teacher doesn't like them. And so again, that social and emotional component is very important. It's more important than what the educator actually knows. It's more important than teaching methodology. For children, it's often about that relationship. And for many children, what helps is someone who has a proven track record as a father figure. They don't necessarily have to be a father, but they have to be good at being a father figure. And so one of the things you want to think about in terms of selecting individuals or an individual to create an educational process for this new school for boys is someone who has a proven track record as a father figure, not just a father figure for boys, but a father figure for girls. You want someone who understands holistically what children need and what is best for children. And so you want to have someone who has a teaching and educating track record that involves showing care and concern, because that's what's going to get to the children. Children understand care and concern. And so some people might be really moved by credentials and things like someone has a doctorate and someone has a doctorate in education, or someone has a doctorate in school psychology. Those doctorates are important for certain things. They may not, however, be the most important thing in terms of a school or an educational process for boys that's going to be different from what the boys are already receiving. And so again, you really need to think about what is your outcome that you are looking for. Just because someone can teach adults does not mean that they can teach children, does not mean that they can reach adolescent boys, does not mean that children are going to receive them very well. Children are kind of fickle. And so again, they are concerned about how much you are concerned. And because we are talking about little boys who have inadequate role models in terms of males, in terms of father figures, it is very important that the individuals selected have that as a part of that resume. So again, the focus needs to be on the character of the educator, the mindset of the educator, the emotional and social disposition of the educator. And the educator has to have a proven track record showing that they are invested in educating. They are gifted in sharing knowledge and helping to bring people from point A to point B. They need to have a track record of producing content that is edifying. When people walk away from it, they have been edified, and you need to see that track record. It's not enough for individuals to tell you they are the greatest of all time. You can decide for yourself if someone is the greatest of all time if you see their work, and you need to see that work. Again, it's not enough to talk about having PhDs and certifications. That is insufficient in terms of what we're talking about here. Those things are important, but there are ways to cultivate the skills and the dispositions that individuals have from getting doctorates in education in other individuals. And so you can also grow your own. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But in terms of that leadership of a school or an educational process, a new one, you need to make sure that that person has a proven track record for educating individuals and groups, and that that's their passion, that is their purpose. And now I want to share with you an individual who fits the bill in terms of the things that I've been sharing with you that we've been discussing here related to creating a new school program for little boys and teen boys. Now, this individual doesn't know that this video is even coming out. And so there has been no discussion of this. So I'm just putting this together, and hopefully the individual will see it and think about this possibility. So this is an individual with a very long track record. And I don't know this individual. So this isn't coming from a space of something that I've discussed with this individual. And so his name is Lenon. And if you go to his channel and his website, you will see that he's been producing content for the community for a very long time. And this isn't, I'm not talking about the African American or the Black community. He's been producing content for the community, meaning globally. Whoever is willing to partake, he's been producing content for those individuals. He has a particular focus on African Americans also, but the concern is for humanity, and a very specific concern for males and men and fathers and husbands. And so he has that proven track record that I'm talking about. He is that gifted and creative educator that I'm talking about. He is that gifted and creative thinker that I am talking about. He is that role model that I'm talking about in terms of a father role model that a number of little boys need. He is that support system that many women who have children have turned to in terms of the content. And you can see in his content where his passion and purpose happens to be. And so he has information for men related to male issues holistically. And so he talks about issues like self-esteem and perseverance and handling emotions and being a present father and being a present husband. He also does a significant amount of social critique. And so you will see that he has information related to the psychological impact of things like the media and certain types of music and certain types of images and messages. He has a significant amount of content related to relationships, not just father-son relationships or husband-wife relationships, but just about relationships in general and how to build healthy relationships. This is the type of person that you need for that school that you all have been investing in that you haven't seen materialize yet. And this is just a brief sample, an extremely brief sample of the catalog of this individual. He has information on better communication, has information on dealing with your own past, and this is particularly for men. He has information related to setting positive examples and how to treat your children. And not only does he have information about it, you actually get to see him in action with his children, with his wife. You get to see them as a family. You get to see him in some of his older content that I've looked at. Now, I have not seen everything, but in some of the older content, you can even see him interacting in the community. There's one video that involved a baby from a neighbor that was abandoned, that was struggling, and what he needed to do to help and get help for that baby. And so you can see that there is quite a bit going on in this content. The most important thing, though, is that this is his purpose. Teaching and educating is a part of his purpose. It is who he is. One important thing is that Mr. Lenon Honor is able to put together extremely creative curricula for individuals. He knows how to meet people where they are to bring them to where they need to be. And that is the mark of an educator. That's the mark of a very gifted educator. Some people just teach, how they learn. That's how they focus on teaching. But you have those individuals who are very gifted, so they know where people are. They know how to go to where people are and then bring them to where they are destined to be. And so he's very practical and very pragmatic in terms of his approach to teaching. And so I encourage you to go to his channel and look at some of his work. He's very in touch with the social and emotional developmental needs of males in particular. And so you will see topics on there related to everything from, manhood training, teaching you how to, start painting and fixing things, to cutting hair, to issues related to forgiveness, the importance of fathers, what happens when you have an absentee father, the responsibilities of fatherhood, babies got to eat. He also looks at when young men are struggling. So he has quite a bit of analysis about what happens for young men who are struggling without a father and dealing with things that serve to derail young men on their life paths. He also has content for single mothers. And so what you have is an individual who is dedicated to helping individuals. So he is which it's called a minister. Minister means serving. And so he is dedicated to being a servant of humanity. And so you can see that in the content. And this is what little boys need in terms of that model. This is what little boys need in terms of an information base. This is what little boys need in terms of that adequate socialization so that they can function adequately in the world. The problems that even when you look at some of the young men who are here on YouTube wreaking havoc right now, the issue is not that they are not smart. Clearly they are smart. The issue is about socialization. And so that is a big part of what is missing in the educational processes for little boys. They need more of that. And so if you're talking about creating new schools and you're funding new schools and you're trying to develop these new programs, you need to think about that first and foremost, because once you get that taken care of, you take care of those emotional and social needs, then the children are prepared to learn. They are prepared to become their personal best. So you take care of those foundational Maslow dynamics like eating, food, clothing, and shelter, and then the children will be prepared to grow. And I've been an educator for a while. I'm also a child psychologist. I feel pretty strongly that in terms of the individuals that you've been exposed to on the internet, and even individuals that I know professionally, this is your man. And this is just additional, brief samples of this individual's work. So you have marriage and divorce topics, how to prepare children, talking about fatherhood, rap music, and is it disrespectful towards women? And so he's also very in tune with the dynamics that are going on between males and females, particularly what's going on here in YouTube world. He also talks about issues such as apologizing and learning how to admit that you are wrong. He is very familiar with health issues in terms of food. And so he has a significant amount of content with his family, with his wife. And so you get this holistic picture. And so, again, it's very important that you have an individual, even if it's not this individual, it's very important that you have an individual who can provide what this individual provides. The issue is that I haven't seen in decades an individual who provides this total package. And so in terms of what I think you all are looking for in terms of these investments that you've made in this school that you're even waiting for right now, I think that this is the person that you've been waiting for. Now, I also don't know Raymond Tuhawks Watson from Fauna, but it appears that this person might also be someone that you might want to approach as a co-consultant for Lenon Honor. and for some type of educational process for the little boys. Again, this is food for thought. I don't know either of these individuals and have not had a discussion with either of them related to this, but from what I've seen, this seems like a viable direction in which people might want to consider going. Those individuals who are invested in creating new educational opportunities for children, particularly African American or Black male or Indigenous children, however you are, coining them right now. Those individuals who are interested in this, I think that these two men might be your men. Now, I know a number of individuals have invested heavily in a school materializing, a new school materializing, and it hasn't come to total fruition yet. There are some other creative options that people might want to consider in terms of educational processes for a number of little boys. You can start off with a small 3-year pilot program, create your mission, your goals, your objectives, your outcomes that you are expecting. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out process starting off. You can start off with something very, very small. You could start off with an on-the-ground day school for a small group of boys. You could also start off with a hybrid where you have a partial day school somewhere and the parents homeschool the rest of the time. So you could have half a day dynamic or certain days in a particular place, a particular location. You can also start off with an online hybrid. Lenon Honor is definitely skilled at providing online content, and so you could start off with an online program and then have monthly or quarterly meetups where you fly Lenon to a particular destination where the children will be, and you could have monthly or quarterly meetups where you have sort of what we call deep dive educational experiences. And so it could be for a long weekend, for an entire week, sort of like a summer camp type of program. You could also, Lenon Honor has 2 teenage sons, and so perhaps those young boys might also want to serve as sort of like camp counselors for this type of program. Again, there are all sorts of options to consider, and you could also have Raymond Two Hawks Watson involved in creating something that looks like a rites of passage program, perhaps in terms of educational processes for the group of little boys, for that monthly or quarterly meetup. You could have an online complete program that is created by Lenon Honor with consultation and parental support for parents who might want to do sort of homeschooling online programs. You could also have where you actually hire Lenon Honor for monthly, quarterly student meetups to be an ancillary process to the regular school process. And so you could have a place where you bring all of the boys to, and then you bring Lenon Honor to for monthly or quarterly student meetups. You could also have a process where there is a set place where you have these monthly, quarterly student meetups as a supplement to regular schools, or you could actually have Lenon Honor flown to these different places around the country to actually provide these quarterly, monthly student meetups. So there are a variety of things that you could possibly do. Again, you could start off with a small pilot program. You don't have to have a brick and mortar school. It would be best if you could, but you don't have to have that. There are lots of other options. And if you do have a brick and mortar building, it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. You don't need, something that's a community center, yoga studio. You don't need all of that. You just need a space that is dedicated to the children. And so there are some, small private schools that are in old homes, and they convert the old home to a learning space. Of course, this serves multiple purposes because you have a learning space that is home-like, and so therefore it's comfortable for the children. And so there are a number of options out there. Another thing that you might want to consider is creating a trust fund account to create these programs, to provide the consulting, and for the expenses for running whatever program it would be. That way you don't have to worry about what's going on with the money. You have the money there for the consulting, for if you have Lenon Honor or whoever it is that you choose. You have the funds there for that, and you have oversight for that. But again, one of the things you do want to think about is creating a process that is holistic, that is complete, and that is competent. You need a competent individual to do what it is that I believe you are thinking about. Now I'm going to share the link for this on Lenon Honors page and also on Raymond Two Hawks Watson's page. Hopefully these individuals will think about this. Perhaps the two of them can come together and think together. Even if they are not able to do it, perhaps they might have some ideas on how to make it come to pass. Those of you who know the individuals, perhaps you can talk with them about how to help it, come to pass, and what might need to be done to create some sort of process for the children. Again, there's a lot of flexibility there. There are lots of options there, and it doesn't have to be in one place, and it's possible to actually have the educators go to the different places and fund them going to the different places to educate a number of children. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.